The challenge of making a multi-line headline, each line the same length or very close to the same length within 3 characters, makes headline writing very challenging. And if you want to get a grade, you can't be lazy with this. You may work quite a while. You may work an hour on your headlines. Now, it doesn't take me that long to write headlines because I've been doing it for decades. And so when I did the demonstration, it may have seemed easy for you, easy to you, that I was doing these headlines very quickly. But because I've been doing it for decades. And so I have a good sense of how many words I can use, and I can, if it doesn't split properly, then I can rewrite it fairly quickly and get it done. And so headlining to me, in an acceptable level, not necessarily an award-winning level, but an acceptable level, is quite easy. For you, it will not be easy. And it will take a lot of practice to become a good headline writer. For you to become, it is possible to become a copy editor right out of college, right out of university, if you're good at it. At the daily paper I was at, we hired a young man right out of college for the copy desk. He probably went to a university, I don't remember which university he went to, but he probably went to a university that had a daily newspaper, a daily student newspaper. A lot of the universities in America have that. They have a daily newspaper, and they may even pay their editors to work on their daily newspaper. I got a scholarship at my university for being the yearbook editor. I don't know if you even know what a yearbook is, but anyway, it's sometimes called an annual. But anyway, I was the editor of that yearbook, and I got a good scholarship for doing that. Actually, I didn't get a scholarship. I got paid. That's right. I already had a scholarship, so they actually paid me cash for being the editor of the yearbook. And so bigger universities in America have that advantage, that their students graduate with more experience in producing a newspaper. Like I say, every day they have a job to go to. At least they're the top students. So it will be a little bit more challenging for you to go out and become a copy editor right away, because you don't have that opportunity to do that. And probably most students in Malaysia don't. So you may be in equal ground. Anyway, coming back to my point with this slide, is that this is a rule, but it's, to me, a lesser rule than other rules. And so I don't pay a lot of attention to it. I definitely pay more attention to making the lines equal length than I do this one. But, for example, in the first one up here on the left, men need to sleep longer, report shows. There should be a comma after longer. But anyway, so this is splitting the infinitive, to sleep. And so a real rigid editor is going to say you can't do that. You may not even encounter a rigid editor like that here, and in fact, I think most editors are starting to relax with this rule. But this was the rule when I went through college, and it's still in our textbook now. Jones loses new bid. Okay, that's not an infinitive. That's basically a verb phrase. So you have your adjective and a noun phrase. So you have your adjective and your noun, and then you say, technically, you shouldn't split those. And so you see the revisions on the right, where they avoided splitting the infinitive in the first one, the noun phrase in the second one, a noun phrase again in the third one, Russian women. They want to avoid splitting Russian and women. In the fourth one, again, you have another split infinitive. They want to avoid that, so they rewrote it in the right. The third one, or the fifth one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is a very long noun phrase, New Mexico site, and so sometimes that might be a little bit harder to avoid, but they did avoid it on the one on the right. Again, it was harder to get it to be exactly the same length, and so you see the second line on the right is like is 3 characters shorter than the one above it. but it's within 3 characters. The one at the bottom then, police work draws in Japanese women. Again, this one is not it's not an infinitive, not a noun phrase, but it's still a draws in as kind of, well, I guess you call it a verb phrase. It's not draws, it's draws in. You're attracting in, draws in. So it's a phrase that acts as one verb. And they avoid it. And the one to the right, again, the lower line, and that headline is about 3 characters short in trying to do that. So they've sacrificed, on the right in a couple of cases, they've sacrificed having those lines being equal in order to avoid having noun phrases or verb phrases split between the lines. So I just want to draw this to your attention. This is a rule, but it's not as important, and you're probably not going to get any deduction if you break this rule in this project, but you do need to be aware of it. You may encounter, and if you go to work for a newspaper, you may encounter an editor who is very strict on this. And so you need to understand what he's talking about. He says, well, you can't split an infinitive. You're going to look at him and say, well, duh, what's an infinitive? So, you need to be aware of this rule. But I will not enforce it strictly in this class. I'm more concerned, but I will enforce fairly strictly that your lines need to be close to the same length. And the maximum is what you see right there, about 3 characters. As I said, I might ignore 4 characters. Once it gets over 4 characters, I won't ignore it anymore. I saw some, like I said, some examples in students' work this morning where it was much too much difference between lines. Yeah, you can't do that. Okay, well, let's have the first presenter come up and load up her PowerPoint here. Our schedule, I did send it out through Moodle, but just in case you didn't see it and weren't in class the other day, our schedule now is on Mondays. In the morning, you will have this room will be available to you in Open Lab here. Monday morning and Monday afternoon from 2 to 4. The one right next door, 105, is available with Windows. So this, of course, has Apple. Over there, they have Windows. So if you need Windows, or if you prefer Windows, Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning, they have Windows Lab available. Wednesday, there's no Windows. There are Apple still, but no Windows Lab. Apple in the afternoon on Tuesday, Apple in the morning and afternoon on Wednesday. No Open Lab on Thursday. On Friday, there's 4 hours in the morning from 8 until 12 of Windows, again next door. If you come during the Windows time, I suspect that you can persuade FISA to open this up for you in here, since she has the keys and has pretty much control of this lab. So say on Friday you want to use the Apple, at the same time she's in the Windows lab, I'm sure she'll come open it for you, and she'll just kind of wander back and forth a little bit. Now also on Monday, next Monday, 2 things you should know. One is that I lie about when your deadline is, so to speak. I announced that the deadline is at 12 midnight, but in reality, Moodle doesn't close until Tuesday morning at 9. So you really have all night if you want to work on it. Obviously, you probably don't want to work all night on it, but Moodle will not close until 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning. So technically, you do have all night to work on it if you want to. However, you won't have labs open, so that means you better have it on your laptop. And again, FISA can download Quark into your laptop. She's already done it for about half of the students, but about half of you have not requested it on your laptops. You can get it from FISA anytime. She basically oversees all these daytime labs, so you can come get it to her during any of those times, or at other times she's in her office over in the A5 building, and you can catch her there also. Anyway, again, what I started to say was that on next Monday, when you have your deadline, I will be here after she's done. On Friday, she'll be here in the morning. I mean, excuse me, on Monday, she'll be here in the morning in the Apple lab. In the afternoon, she'll be from 2 to 4 in 105, and I will come sometime at 4 or 5 o'clock. At the time she quits, I will come and take over her place. And so the Windows lab will be open until 8 o'clock at night on next Monday. So you have time to work on your projects. That one has about 70, or at least a lot of computers. So probably anybody who has not downloaded it into their own laptop should be able to come on Monday and fit into 105 next door with all the computers in there. And again, if you come during that time, any time there between 2 and 8 o'clock, I'm presuming again that FISA will do it, but definitely I will open up this lab also for those who want to use the Apple computers during that green period there from 4 until 8. So if you have not done it before Monday, you will have time on Monday to finish this assignment if you will take the time to do it. My estimate is that unless you have totally ignored all the instruction to date, you should be able to do this in 6 hours. And probably shorter, but I think any of you that have paid any attention should be able to do this assignment in 6 hours. So if you don't do anything until Monday, you should still be able to do it on Monday. So that's the best I can do for you. Okay, so I will close that and we will get started with the presentation. Oh yeah, that's where I was going to get it here.
Good evening, everyone. So today I will be presenting writing titles, blurbs, and captions. Newspapers have headlines and magazines have titles. Magazines usually include titles with a conversational tag, a more casual sentence rather than a secondary headline. For example, Love Story. The death of 28-year-old Sergei Grinkov was the final chapter in one of sport's great romances. Run for the Roses. After Michigan's stunned previously unbeaten Ohio State, joy bloomed at Northwestern. A newspaper called this convention a hammerhead. This idea is to catch the reader's eye with a bold title and then follow with an explanation that gives more details. In magazine, the whole page titles, pictures, and placement are designed to make the readers say to themselves, I wonder what this is all about. Unlike newspaper, the magazine editor usually will select a typeface for title that will help to illustrate the mood of the story. Magazine title writing is free form in both style and content, and they can be placed in the middle, at the bottom, or on one side of the page. Typically, news sites, they follow the conventions of newspaper headline writing, while other sites, they carry a mixture of headline and title writing. But there are significant differences between writing headlines for print and websites. Susan Levinson, director of site operation, argues that for several reasons, search engine optimized headlines must be different from those that appears in the newspaper or magazine. First one, keywords matter. Keywords often are missing in the print headline, but search engines look for relevant keywords to help the readers to find the story. It is important to always optimize your web headline for search, because even if you include all the text to search without all those relevant keywords on the main story, on the main head, the story will rank low in the list of search results. Second, no context for web headline. In other words, it means that on the web there may not be a photo, caption, subhead, or any section label such as telling you whether it's a national or international or a sport news that help the reader to figure out what the story is about. And even if some of those exist, the search engines allows the readers to get into the story without the surrounding context. Third, print headlines are often too long or too short for online. As a result, they don't automatically work on the internet. Number 4, print headlines often are written awkwardly to fit in the space exactly on print edition, while web headline can be much more longer since space is less of a consideration. And then clever headline on prints, they do not work on the web because people, they want information and they don't want to be teased. Now I'm going to talk about blurbs. What are blurbs? Blurbs are also called pull out, pull quotes, and so on. Whatever they are called, they are the information in big type that either provides a summary or a sample of the story. From what I have read on other websites, blurbs also means that a brief information about the writer, usually at the top or bottom of the article. So this is the blurb. Okay. There are several kinds of blurbs. The first one is external blurbs. They are the summary blurbs, and they generally come between the headline and the lead of the story, in which case, sometimes they are called readout blurbs. And then readout blurbs are similar in function to second text, but they allow more flexibility and more space to say more. Sometimes, generally on featured stories, an external blurb may be above the headline, in which case it's called a read-in blurb because it reads into the headline. And then internal blurbs, they are the sample blurbs and they are placed somewhere within the story, usually with rules above and below them. Most often they are used for pull quotes, the most interesting quote or quotes from the story. So in some cases, if none of the quotes are that colorful, but the page designer have prepared for the space, then an internal blurb may simply be the interesting information of the story rather than a quote. Now I'm going to talk about caption. We all know that what is caption, the text used to describe or explain a published photograph. But do you guys know that there are several kinds of captions? So I'm going to explain. First one is called name line. A name line is a one-line description, is a one-line caption under a marked shot and consists only of a person's name. So this is the marked shot with one-line caption. And then a name line under a full column marked shot will have the person's first name and last name, while a name line under a half column marked shot will consist only the person's last name. Name line underline. Some people, they will put a one-line description under a name line. This is called name line underline. For example, name line Hillary Clinton and then underline Mom on Syrian uprising. Underline. An underline is a one-line caption, except for when it's part of a name line underline, like what I have just mentioned just now. The underline should be a full sentence and have a period or question mark at the end. So an underline should never be less than half the space width that was allowed for it. Ideally, it should fill all the line. Cut line. Cut line is actually the synonym of caption that has multi-line and used to describe the photograph or illustration. A cut line in one or two columns may be any number of lines long. For example, this one. And then in 3 columns or more, a cut line is usually divided into 2 or more wraps. For example, this one. So 2 white columns of type, they will be under the 3 column photos. And each column, they should have equal number of lines long, so that they are equally long. A catch line. is a brief, catchy title of a stand-alone photo, which means a photo with no story other than the information in the card line. It's typically 1 to 3 words and in capital letters. So most readers they don't completely read many news stories in the newspaper. Instead, they will look at the photo, graphics, and the big type. They will use the headline, captions, and blurbs as an index to the news story, deciding which news stories to read. So tell the story as complete as possible in the main head, then use additional devices such as second text, blurbs or captions to add as much important news as possible. So this is also to get across more information to people who won't be reading the story, and then as well as hooks to gain people's attention. Second, put the main idea in the biggest type and the next most important idea in the next biggest type, and so on. This means that you will follow this type of order, like main idea, main head, second deck, blurb, and caption. And then don't repeat information that is already in the graphic or the text itself. This is just wasting the opportunity to get across more information. And then make sure none of the information contradicts information in the other elements or in other stories. And make sure spelling of the names are correct and consistent. And then write in full sentences. Don't cut articles out like the, and, or, to be verbs from the blurbs and captions. And lastly, learn the local styles or matter, like whether the newspaper they will use single or double quotations when they are writing blurbs and captions. So now I have some small quiz for you guys. The first question, according to Susan Levinson, search engine optimized headlines should be different from headlines in print or magazine. Which of the following is incorrect? 1 minute. C. The answer is correct. Wait. The answer is correct. In comparison to web headline, print headline the answer is C, because print headline should be shorter than web headline because they have less space to fit in. And second, what is the function of blurbs? What are blurbs? 1 minute. Donkey. Okay, correct. To provide a summary or a sample of a story. Number 3. Information that come between the headline and the lead of the story are called external blurbs. Correct. Number 4. A name line is a one-line caption under a mugshot and consists of only of the person's name. True or false? It's true. Last question. Which of the following about blurbs and captions is correct? A. Make sure none of the information contradicts information in the other elements or in the story. So in my conclusion, although the process of writing headlines and other elements seem very complicated, publications and websites, they do a great job of crafting headlines, titles, and other display types. They really give a big they really give their readers a big assist. And also, this makes the news stories more visibility and helps to sell the news stories more effectively. Thank you.
Adopting some of the magazine styles a little bit. While a magazine may call it a title and a blurb, nevertheless, it's essentially the same thing when we're talking about a hammerhead with a headline, with a newspaper, and then a summary sentence below it. You can be called a blurb also. Typically, it is below it, not above it. You might find in a feature page where they've devoted an entire page to a feature story and to related photos and stuff, where they are much more like a magazine style. And indeed, you might have a blurb above the headline in that case, but that would be mostly with a feature story in a newspaper, much more common in a magazine. And you also heard how things change when you get into the online, where things have to be somewhat different. So hopefully you can keep those separated in your mind, the difference between a newspaper headline and a magazine title and the headline or title you might have on a website. Okay, let's go to the next presentation then.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Today I'm talking about the Chapter 10, Using Photo. In the new media era in which visual stimulation is important to attract the attention of readers, the power of visual is strong and undeniable. The visual, including photo, typography, colors, video, and also infographics. They are also an important part of the content. And there's a research from the Poynter Institute. They said about 90% of readers enter page through large photo, artwork, or display type, such as headline and advertisement. And running a visual element with text make it 3 times more likely that at least some of the text will be read. And headlines are more likely to be read when a photo is nearby. And also the last one is the bigger the photo, the more likely readers are to read the caption. As a result, photograph and information graphic might increase both comprehension of text and interest in story. Graphic, photograph, and headline get far more attention from readers than text does. So this chapter addresses the fundamentals of using photos, graphics, and type devices available in all of the media capable of visual communication. Editing for graphic appeal. Editor can do much to help increase graphic appeal. This is the tips to increase the graphic appeal. The first one is have a sidebar. If a story is long, you may consider breaking it into a main story and separate sidebars. The second one is visual possibilities. People will be more attracted to story with photo or graphics. So keep the visual possibility of each story in mind when designing a page. Then the third one is bullet. We can use bullet to list a lot of items in a minimal amount of space and with added contrast. And a subheading can help break it into shorter and logical parts. Also, we have to make sure the photographer knows the mood and theme of the story and takes picture of the main people being interviewed. And line art are sometimes preferable when a camera may be intrusive. It can explain complicated processes or things by stripping away the exterior and showing the inner workings of the object. And this is the example of the line art. And the last one is double check. Double check charts for accuracy of figures. Today, a good newspaper treats graphical elements as the editorial equivalent of story. They are assigned with the same care and often at the same time as news and features articles. Also, photo editors are key members of the newsroom management team, usually equal in rank to news, city, or metropolitan editors. The visual literacy is critical to the competent editor. Visual literacy is the ability to interpret, negotiate, and make meaning for information presented in the form of an image, extending the meaning of literacy, which commonly signifies interpretation of a written or printed text. The relationship of photographer and editor is very important. Photographers should have a voice in how their pictures are displayed. An editor who have given photographer that voice invariably have been pleased with that result. A key to improvement in the quality of picture is allowing the photographer to become involved in the story from the outset. If the reporter, photographer, and editor fail to communicate with each other, it may result fail to convey a message with the photo. And also, an important part of these communication processes involve writing the photo order, the document given to the photographer when an assignment is made. The editing decision. The photo editor must make editing decisions that affect the quality of the final product. They must determine which photo complement the written story or tell a story of their own, whether cropping enhances the image, or what size a photo must be to communicate effectively, whether retouching is necessary. Photo selection. Photo selection is very important because variable space is waste if the pictures does nothing more than depict a scene that could be described more efficiently with words. If the pictures add nothing to the reader's understanding of a story, it should be rejected. Some pictures capture the emotion or flavor of a situation more vividly than words. Also, words and photographs can provide perfect complements. Another one is cropping. A photograph is a composition. The composition should help the reader immediately grasp the picture's message. But if the picture contains a strong focal point, the reader at least has a place to start. And this is an example of how cropping can bring out an interesting detail in a photograph. This is the close-up view. Close-up view was photographed with a lunar surface camera during the Apollo 11 lunar surface extravehicular activity. This tight cropping allows the reader to see interesting detail. And in this photo, tight cropping eliminates the environment and damages the picture. This tight cropping takes the farmer out of his environment by making it difficult or impossible for the reader to determine that the setting is a barn. Also, the photo editor attempts to reserve the rule of thirds. There's 4 points where these lines intersect are considered the best focal point or centers the interest for the photo. The rule of thirds is applied to avoid the placement of the subject at the center and prevent a horizon from appearing to divide the picture in half. Then the third one is sizing. Sizing any photograph is an important decision, but sizing of pictures in multi-photograph package is particularly important. Dramatic size contrast is an effective device in multi-picture package. An editor trained in visual communication understands the usefulness of reversing normal sizing patterns for added impact. As many editors would run the overall folding shoot rather than the picture of the farmer laying sandbag in place. And the last one is electronic enhancement. Some photographs can be improved by electronic enhancements, once called retouching, the process of toning down or eliminating distraction within the frame. We have to ensure that electronic enhancement does not change the meaning and content of the photo. Pictures as copy. Most photos are sent from desk to desk within a newsroom electronically. Although at some magazines actual photographic prints are still used, if photos are handled as prints, a slip of paper clipped on the picture or taped to the back normally contains information such as the identifying word or name of the picture, the size, special handling instructions, the department edition and page, the date the photo is to appear, the date and time the picture was sent to the production department, and a notation of whether the photo stands alone or accompanies a story. Technology is changing the way photographs are processed at newspaper, magazine, and website nowadays. Today, most photographs are taken digitally and electronically processed. Lighten or darken, sharpen, crop, and size. They're using programs such as Adobe Photoshop. And the function of the digital processing is saves time, which is of paramount importance for publication. Taste in picture editing. This was a tragic fire in the Boston metropolitan area. A woman and a child took refuge on an ironwork balcony. As firefighters tried to rescue them, the balcony collapsed, and sending the woman to her death and the child to a miraculous survival. And the second shot of the balcony collapsing in Boston, this photo have defended by most editors because some reader would be incensed accusing the paper of sensationalism, poor taste, invasion of privacy, insensitivity, and a tasteless display of human tragedy to sell newspaper. But the picture editor's duty is to present the news whether of good things or bad things. And the last one, caption guidelines. The primary purpose of the caption is to get the reader to respond to the photo in the manner intended by the photographer and the picture editor. The function of the caption is to interpret and expand on what the picture says to the reader and provides the answer to question of 5W1H unless some of these are apparent in the picture. And also helps to explain ambiguities, comments on what is not made clear in the picture, and mention what the picture fails to show if that is necessary. And the ideal caption is direct, brief, and sometimes bright. The length of the caption should be limited to 2 or 3 lines. And captions stand out in the sea of the words and strike the reader with peculiar force. Every word should be weighed, especially for impact, emotional tone, impartiality, and adherence to rules of grammar. And this is the tips of caption writing. don't tell the obvious, don't editorialize, use specifics rather than generalities, or make reference to the photo. Avoid looking on, don't write caption in the present tense. Make sure the caption is accurate and double check the photo with the caption identification. Q&A section. The first one, photograph and information graphic markedly increase both comprehension of text and interest in stories. The answer is true. And the second one is editing decision would not affect the quality of the final product. The answer is false, because editing decision will affect the quality of the final product. And the third one, sizing help the reader immediately grasp the picture's message. Answer is false. The answer is cropping. Not sizing, is cropping. And the fourth one, the rule of third is applied to avoid the placement of the subject at the center and prevent a horizon from appearing to divide the picture in half. The answer is true. And the fifth one, the caption is to get the reader to respond to the photo in the manner. The answer is true. That's all. Thank you.
Let me turn back on the thing here. Let me see what. With as far as photos go, your selection, probably the most important thing you do in photo editing is cropping. Not the only thing you do, but it's the most important thing you do. How do you crop a photo? How do you highlight the most important aspect of the photo? The second part is sizing, and again, this blends in with the rules, the critique sheet for your layout, because two aspects. First off, you need to have different size photos on your page. If you do not have a dominant photo, you will be, downgraded. You need one photo to dominate that page. So how you choose that photo will be important. Like some of my discussion with students this morning, as they showed me their pages, related to that. Which picture did you choose, and why did you choose it to dominate your page? If it has no action in the photo, if it's pretty much a boring photo, then I'm going to question your choice of a dominant photo. So you need to try to, and yet at the same time you have a conflict, because on the one hand you have decided that the most important story, you have a certain story you think is most important. Therefore you want to put that to the top of your page, but it doesn't have good photos. This is a challenge for every editor. And so there's no point complaining to me about it. This is a challenge for every editor. Another challenge that was brought to me this morning was, well, I have a really good photo in content for my lead story, but the quality of the photo isn't very good. That's your problem. You're the editor. Solve the problem. It's okay. You can go take your own photo if you want to. You can do whatever you want to do, but this is real life. We're putting out a real newspaper, and we have the photos that we have. And so you have to make the best decision you can, and I will look at your work. In fact, that's one reason why I went ahead and assigned the same stories to the same people, or to a group of people, so I can see what somebody else did. And so when I grade your paper, I'll probably be looking at the papers of all your teammates and see how they did. So that gives me a quick idea of what photos are available. And so if you choose a bad photo and somebody else chooses a good photo, I can see right away, bad decision here. Choosing the photo, cropping the photo, sizing the photo are all really, really, really important decisions an editor makes in laying out their newspaper. And those are decisions you're going to have to be making as you produce this this second project, this first design project, second project overall, is how you handle your graphics. Because that, the same as was said a second ago, it draws, your use of graphics will have an incredible impact on how people will approach your story or your page, whether or not they'll read your page at all, whether or not they'll read certain stories on your page. And so your decisions will have a huge impact on readership. So again, what graphics you use, their quality overall, your selection is which is a big picture, which is a small one, how you crop it and so forth. Very major questions in your work as an editor. I talked about a little bit the other day, but sizing also relates to if you have a picture of like 8 people lined up smiling at the camera. First off, I hate that picture right away. But if that's your only choice or your best choice, because you don't have better photos than that, so you have this lineup of people staring at the camera, you still can impact it with your cropping. If you have 8 people smiling at the camera and you've left lots of dead space on the left and on the right and above and below, major deduction, because by cropping it down, you can bring those images back up so that I can see their faces, and hopefully their eyes aren't shut and stuff like that. Cropping your photo will be very important. Also, sizing it in that for that same reason. If you try to cram 12 people into 2 columns, not going to be a good photo. You can't get 12 heads into 2 columns and have a good picture. You can't probably get at the very most 3 heads into 1 column, and even then I might still criticize it depending on the photo. In 1 column, probably normally you shouldn't have more than 2 in a 1 column photo. When you get to 2 columns, maybe you can get 5 or 6 in 2 columns. Maybe, and I'm not guaranteeing I won't deduct for that. We have to see the faces in order to make a photo any good, and so you need to make sure that the photo is big enough that the faces are visible and so forth. So those are all considerations as you handle your photos, and your photos are one of your most important decisions in being an editor. Again, how to crop, where to place, how to size. All this is critical to the success of your work as an editor. Going back to the titles and so forth. One thing I forgot to talk about, I can't remember whether it was discussed in the presentation tonight, but I have talked about it a little bit before, but the use of what they call catch lines for standalone photos. Standalone photos are standalone for typically 2 reasons. One is you don't have a story. That's probably not the case with your pages that you're doing for this assignment, although one of your options as an editor, I've told you can go take your own photos if you want to. And so if you really have no good photos, go take a good photo. But if you don't have a story with it, then that's where you have a standalone photo. One option with a standalone photo is there simply is no story with it. And so your story is the caption. All you have to write with a standalone photo is the caption. Tell us enough of this, write a good enough caption that it's worth running that picture by itself. So again, your story is one paragraph long, basically. It's a one paragraph long caption. That's the story. Now, with that, you have a small headline. It has been, for some reason, it's been kind of the, you can somehow have, in anything really, but in journalism, you can have or PR separately, you can have kind of a culture build up. We've always done it this way, sort of a culture. And so the culture with standalone photos is using a catch line that doesn't necessarily have a verb in it. And so it might be like a 4-word catch line, kind of like a hammerhead. It's kind of like a hammerhead. May have no verb whatsoever, and it may not take the whole space. It may only take half the space of the width of the photo, or even less. So it's very much like it's not big like a hammerhead, but it's written kind of like a hammerhead. Very short, 1, 2, 3, mostly no more than 4 words. That said, that doesn't mean you can't write a full headline. Some newspapers and some publications are writing complete headlines with standalone photos. And so I'm not saying you cannot write, when I'm saying this, I'm not saying you cannot write a full headline with a standalone photo. You can. I will definitely not take out points if you write a full headline with it. But I'm telling you what the norm is that's discussed in the book is they use a catch line, not a headline. And the catch line is kind of like a hammerhead, not because of its size, but in the sense it has no verb. It's not an active headline. Does not have an active verb. So that's the kind of the culture for some reason, the norm of the industry, although I can't really justify it in my mind. Why not have an active verb in it? I don't know. But that's the norm. The other reason to have a standalone photo probably doesn't apply to you at this assignment. It could, and that is you put a photo on page 1 and you put the story on another page, which in your case would have to be page 2. That's your only other page. But very frequently you might have a sports photo on page 1. And page 1, you don't want to take room for a sports story typically. And so you have a really good photo. You put that on page 1, and you still use a catch line, a little headline, and you say story on page C1, or story on page D1, or story on page A7, or whatever, wherever you find that story. You put a reference line as the last part of your caption. You typically, with that, maybe make it bold to attract people to the fact that this does have a story, but it's not here in this page. It's someplace else. And so they can go find it quickly. So those are 2 uses of standalone photos, one of which you could actually use for this assignment, and that is you hate all the photos you have, and so you go take a better photo and make that your main photo of your page and make it a standalone photo. All you have to do is write the caption and your catch line, and you have a standalone photo to put on your page because you don't like the other options you have. Of course, you could also go take a photo that relates to one of the stories. I don't care. You can do that too. Let me see what else, if there's anything else I wanted to cover. I think that was all I wanted to cover. So I will give you the rest of the period to work on your stuff. I will position myself probably right up here, and if anybody wants to show me what you've done so far to get my critique, I can only spend a few minutes with each of you, so I'm not going to grade your assignment, anything like that, but I will tell you what I would do differently. And so I can give you some hint if you want to have me look at it. If you have your laptop, you can bring it up here. If you want me to come back, if you're using a desktop and want me to come look at your desktop, I can do that. But on the other hand, if you don't want to use an Apple and you don't have your laptop and want to leave, that's okay too. Or if you finished your project already, you can leave early. I won't be offended. Whatever you want to do. Any questions? Again, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to address those now. If not, like I say, you can just call on me for help if you have something you want me to look at or to ask or to get my opinion on. And if you don't have anything to do, you can leave. Okay, thank you.